All right, guys, well, it's now time to start evaluating the beef carcasses. One thing that I do want to mention is understand that muscle color is contributed by one protein, globular protein, that we refer to as myoglobin. Myoglobin is a globular protein that has iron in the center of its structure. One of the things that we've learned over years, and these were what happened when my colleagues started to look into muscle and meat way back when, is that we quickly learned that when we rib or expose muscle that was once intact or even in a vacuum package, it's best to allow it roughly about 20 minutes on average, 20 to 30 depending on who you talk to let it bloom. And so what do I mean by bloom time? Bloom time means that I'm going to allow this ribeye some time to mix with oxygen. Let oxygen mix in with myoglobin. Remember, that's that globular protein responsible for giving meat its red color. And let it bloom from a dark red or a dark colored red to more of a cherry red, as you can see right here. And that is going to be very important during evaluation, because as you can see, there are these little white flecks of fat in that actual ribeye, and that's what we want to look at when we're talking about quality, especially looking at marbling score. And so the better cherry red, the brighter cherry red this color is, the better it is for us who evaluate carcasses to really see that level of marbling. So one thing that we'll start with is going to be with yield grades. Yield grading is going to be basically the percent sellable product available in this whole carcass. So some of the factors that we take into account is going to be back fat and muscling. Now remember, this particular carcass weighs 816 pounds. So what does that mean, and why is that even important? Well, I want to know how much of that 816 pounds is coming from muscling versus fat. And this is where me coming in and evaluating using certain tools really helps guide me to do what I need to do. Now, then once I get or collect all my factors, all my data, then I plug it into a USDA formula. Again, this has been existing since probably the 1960s, and that formula will tell me percent sellable product, but it'll also tell me more along the lines of the yield grade. Now, beef carcasses have 5 yield grades: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yield grades 1 and 2 are going to be more of your leaner carcasses, heavy muscled, whereas yield grades 4s and 5s are going to be more lighter muscled and more external fat and more back fat. So yield grades 1s and 2s is where you'll have more sellable product, whereas yield grades 4s and 5s, you have less sellable product, you have more waste. And so, and yield grade 3s is what we consider the safe zone, right? There's no premium, there's no discount, you are actually safe. And so let's go ahead and start measuring. So one of the first things that I'm going to look for is going to be back fat. Now, as you can see, I have this nice USDA ruler that has a ruler here on one side that's measured in inches, and then I have on the other side, it's more what we call a PYG ruler, or a preliminary yield grade ruler. But today I'm going to use the inch ruler. And so what normally is, I have to find my main area of interest, which is this main muscle here, known as the ribeye. I want to measure 3/4 up that ribeye. So if I cut my ribeye in half and then cut the top part in half, that's where I'm going to measure for my back fat. Okay. The next thing I'll do is I will then account for the size of the ribeye. Now, once again, here's my main area of interest. I'm going to use this ribeye dot grid, as you can see right here, showing outlines and dots and squares and so forth. And every 10 dots equals 1 square inch. As you can see, I already know this area. There are 20 dots up in this area, so that's divided by 10, which gives me a 2 square inch area. There are 80 dots in this area, divided by 10, that gives me an 8 square inch area. And then I have 10 dots here at this bottom portion, which gives me a 1 square inch. So I already know this what's already outlined. And so all I'm going to do now is place it right on this ribeye. I like to align my straight edge along with that rib to try to just make it easier to count. Now, with this particular ribeye, again, I already know what's in here, so all I'm going to do is count on the outside of what this actually is. I am not concerned about any of these muscles down here, the spinalis dorsi. I'm not concerned about any of these up here, once again. This is my main area of interest. The other portion, the other thing that we'll look at is percent internal fat. Now, if you notice right on the inside of this carcass, we have a big lump of fat right in here, and then this is where that hard fat's going to sit, right along right here and right here, because this is the same carcass, just split in two. So of the 816-pound carcass, we have to estimate how much of that weight is coming from internal fat. This is what we refer to as kidney, pelvic, and heart fat. Kidney, because this is where the kidney knob sits. Pelvic, because that is right where the pelvic area is. And then, of course, here we have the heart. And so with this particular one, you know, this is where I estimate about a good, in looking at both sides, I would say that this particular carcass, internally, we have 2% of the actual internal fat contributing to the 816 pounds. Now, Dr. Garcia, how in the world did you come up with that? Well, I'll tell you, kiddos, I have spent a lot of time evaluating beef carcasses. I've spent more time in packing plants than I want to admit. And so with enough practice and enough evaluations of thousands and thousands and thousands of carcasses in my lifetime, eventually you really catch on and you gain enough confidence to do this. But normally with a carcass show, what I normally do is, because usually some of this will be impacted on that slaughter floor. Well, they'll remove some of it on the slaughter floor. That's usually when I will just apply a standard kph, percent kidney pelvic heart fat, to everyone, just to make it fair. Okay? So that's what we have for yield grading. Now, when it comes to quality grade, because remember, not only do we want to know about percent sellable product, but in the case of beef carcasses, we want to know the quality grade too. Now, what do I mean by quality grade? Well, there are two factors that make up quality grade: age of the animal at time of harvest and the marbling score. So as you can see, I have carcasses in here, but I don't have birth records. So then how do we estimate the age of the animal? Well, there's one thing that we do know, based on my colleagues who has investigated this way back in the 1950s and 60s and just kind of perfected it as time went on. Native cattle will age from the back to the front. What do I mean by aging? Well, here's one thing that I'll show you. Here in the thoracic area, right where we expose that ribeye, here you have the vertebral column, which is the backbone, and coming off the backbone are what we call the spinous process, or feather bones. This is nothing but bone. But at the tip of these feather bones, we have what we call thoracic buttons. Thoracic, because this is the thoracic portion of the 5 parts to a skeleton. The younger the animal, the more cartilage you will see, because this is exactly what this white piece right here is cartilage. The whiter, the pearly white, the cleaner, the very youthful animal. Now, what did I mean when I said that native cattle will age from back to front? Well, just like in the thoracic buttons here at the very tip of the lumbar, we also have thoracic buttons. And then what you can't see here, with the sacral vertebrae, we also will have cartilage as well. That's the name, that's the theme to what we use, especially in our U.S. industry when our grader is evaluating for age. He or she will start here at the thoracic, and if there is any kind of doubt, any questions, then we actually will refer up to the lumbar. But as you can see with this one in particular, this is nothing but pearly white. This is nothing but cartilage. At no point do you see any type of bone, because ossification means that cartilage is then replaced by bone, or it would look more like this. But that's not the case with the carcass in front of us. There's nothing but cartilage right along the tips. There's nothing but cartilage right along the lumbar vertebrae, and there's cartilage at the sacrum. So this tells me that this animal was younger than 30 months of age. I'm willing to estimate 16 to 18 months because on average, that's what our industry cattle are when they're sent to the packing house. So age of animal is one factor when evaluating for quality grades, and the other is marbling. Now, what do I mean by marbling again? Well, remember those white flecks of fat that we had talked about? This is what I'm talking about. This is where with enough training and enough evaluating of carcasses, you tend to get pretty good with this. And that's where meat judging can come into play to really help you with this. But you can see that there are differences in the amount of marbling in these two pictures. Now, what I have in front of me are actually cards that we use as a gold standard that USDA provides from the National Cattle and Beef Association. Graders use these cards. We use them in academia. Packing plants use them too for their employees who are working in the sales cooler. You know, this is our gold standard that we go off of. And so in looking at this beef carcass, what I normally do is I'll walk up to it and I'll just call it in my head. I'll try to test myself and see where I am. And right away I say, you know, I have a choice between select, choice, and prime. And when I say select, I'm looking at high and low select. When I say choice, I'm also thinking about low choice, average choice, and high choice. And when I'm looking at prime, I'm also thinking low prime, average prime, and high prime. And in this particular case, and I'll give an example, one thing that I do in my mind, just to kind of do a process of elimination, just to help better understand or help explain this, is here I have a select marbling. This is a slight 0. This is the minimum requirement for it to be considered select. And then I have a low choice, which is a small 0, which is a minimum requirement of it to hit a low choice. So what I normally do is I envision these two cards in my mind, and then I ask myself, where exactly does this ribeye fall between these two? So in looking at these two, what I can say is, you know, I personally believe that this particular ribeye obviously beats the low select card, but it's not quite enough to reach or cross over into the low choice category. So with that being said, I think this particular ribeye is closer to a low choice, but not quite there. So that right there tells me it's a high select. And so there you have it, folks. In beef carcasses, when we're looking at evaluation, we want to know how much percent sellable product is available along with the quality grade. The one that best combines quality grade with yield grade is the one who's going to make the most money per 100 pounds when it's actually sold.